What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Plaisant's podcast, filled to the brim with glitchy analysis and freezing cold takes, so cold that they're boiling hot. In this episode, we are going to be doing a college football preview for Iowa State, the Cyclones. Let's go ahead and get into the stars of this team. There are quite a few. At quarterback, Rocco Becht, he is going to be a guy who's going to be slinging the rock this year. 3,000 yards passing last season. I fully believe he's going to be right back in that spot this year, and he's going to be throwing to his star wide receiver, Jaden Higgins, a top 10 receiver in the country, in my opinion. This guy is a ball hawk. I'm thinking minimum 1,000-yard season, if not more. At least 80 catches, maybe even more than that. I mean, when it comes to this connection between Rocco Becht and Jaden Higgins, it's almost unstoppable, especially in the Big 12. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, we've got Kennard Snyder, who is a transfer. I'm not sure if he's going to start the season, but he's definitely going to be an impactful player on this team, somebody to look out for when it comes to rushing the passer. And then in the back of the defense with the safeties, Jeremiah Cooper and Bo Frailer. These guys make up the best backside duo in all of college football. Both of these guys, top 10 safeties in the country, and to pair them together is a dangerous game. These guys are all over the field, run stopping, getting to the quarterback, protecting the pass, covering almost every side of the field. I will get into why that is exactly. First of all, it's their talent, but second of all, it's their scheme. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Let's go ahead and get into a storyline, the losses and additions for this team, and then we'll get into our great record prediction. So first storyline I want to talk about, Matt Campbell is a young star in the making. I want to talk about this. Iowa State, I believe, has had 4 8+ win seasons in the 21st century. Matt Campbell has he has 3 of the 4, and he's only 44 years old. The Cyclones have 9 upset wins versus top 25 teams since he took over back in 2016. Extremely impressive stuff. Iowa State is known as a spoiler team because of Matt Campbell and his persistence to build competitive teams over and over and over again. And I think he's got another one here with this year's Iowa State team. Let's go ahead and get into the losses and additions for this program. The losses side of things, there weren't really that many significant losses. Eli Sanders is probably the best one of note. Backup running back. He hits the portal and goes to New Mexico to be the starter there. But that's really it. They did have one DB drafted, but nothing of note, in my opinion, to be like, wow, there's a hole on this team that isn't being filled. The addition side of things, they bring in quite a few players. Jalen Travis, by the way, is somebody I want to talk about. Comes in from Princeton, transfers in 6'9", 315 pounds. He's going to be the starting left tackle. Man, what a mammoth of a offensive tackle. This guy's going to be really impressive to watch. And then Kennard Snyder, already talked about him. Like I said, he comes in from ULM. I don't know, and by the way, ULM is Louisiana Monroe, Sun Belt team, but I don't know if he's going to be in the starting lineup to start the season, but I definitely think he will progress his way there and be an impactful player on this team. So those are 2 big additions. Now let's go ahead and get right back into the storylines. They're going to be bringing back the majority of their crew, like I said. The majority of the starting lineup on offense and defense, they're all back. They've grown a lot. But the big thing that I want to talk about is the establishment and consistency of this 3-3 defensive scheme. To me, it is what makes Iowa State so dangerous in the Big 12. Obviously, when you think about the Big 12, you think about like no defense, actually. But when you have 5 DBs on the field and you have all these great quarterbacks throughout the history of the Big 12, like a Quinn Ewers and a Baker Mayfield and this, that, and the other, it makes it a little bit harder to throw when you've got a bunch of high-flying corners and safeties on the field, and Iowa State has that last year and this year, and I think it's going to be a big difference maker. Last thing I want to talk about is a hinge game, and that hinge game is versus Iowa. It is at Iowa this year in Ames, Iowa, and I do think that's probably a loss, but if they can win that Iowa State team is going to be quite dangerous for the rest of the season. But a couple things to note, Iowa is 7-1 versus Iowa State in the last 8 games. Iowa State is only averaging 15 points per game, and that's including a 41-point performance. If you take that out, the points per game is pretty abysmal. But I do want to point this out. I've seen a lot of reports that starting quarterback for Iowa, Cade McNamara, is kind of a shell of himself. And I think if you get him early on in the season and you harass him with these great safeties, Iowa State could win this game. If they do, their schedule looks a whole hell of a lot easier than it does when they're 1-1 rather than 2-0. So let's go ahead and get into our record prediction. I have Iowa State going 7-5, but it is a very feisty and competitive 7-5, and quite honestly could easily transform into 9-3. I honestly think that 7-5 is the floor, but because of some of these games that we're going to talk about, I've got them at 7-5. So let's go ahead and talk about the games. North Dakota coming into town. I think that is a win. If you have Iowa next, it's going to be rough. I definitely think that they can compete here, but I'm going to give Iowa's defense the edge. That's their first loss of the season. Then 3 straight wins versus Arkansas State, at Houston, and versus Baylor. Those are all easy wins. These programs are nowhere on par with where Iowa State's at. At West Virginia, very tough to win in Morgantown. And I do think that they're going to have a bounce back year. So I give Iowa State the loss there. Hosting UCF and Texas Tech, I will give Iowa State the wins there. I believe that if you look at Texas Tech's schedule, that is their second loss of the year, and I think it will be a major upset. Iowa State gets the win. Then at Kansas, that is a loss. Jalen Daniels is going to wreak havoc on this front seven, so that's a loss. Versus Cincinnati, that is a good win. Cincinnati is a rebuilding program. Their team is not really there yet, and Iowa State's is. But then back-to-back losses to end the year. At Utah, the best team in the Big 12, and then hosting Kansas State. I think that could be a very surprising upset, but I will give Kansas State the edge. They're probably the second best team in the conference. So 7-5. It's a pretty feisty season. Like I said, it could easily go 9-3, but that's where I've got them right now. That's going to do it for the Iowa State Cyclones. Thanks all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.